when you realize how tiny a blip we are, here on this planet, and how much more there is of us out, uncontained in this little body. The more we realize, it's like, my God, people think they know so much, but actually, my goodness, how little we know, and how we insist we know the truth. That's the scary thing to me, is when people insist that their perspective and their point of view is the real point of view.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And it's changed. I know I always say it's Christmas morning. I come down to the tree and the universe has greeted me with this incredible being. Well, let's do that times 5. I'm very grateful to welcome to the podcast Smita Joshi. How are you, my dear friend?
Thank you so much, San. Lovely, lovely, lovely to be on your show, and lovely to meet you as well. Privileged. So I feel this morning.
I'm very, very grateful. You have definitely, I live my life as energy, frequency, vibration. And when I came across your incredible admission, transmission, and just the mastery and your insight into what it is that you share with the world, I was absolutely blown away. And that's why I invited you on the podcast. And I want you to go deeper, my friend, into that. But first and foremost, let's start with just a little snippet of where you came from and how we got here today.
I'll give you a very short version of that. So I was born in Porbandar, which is Mahatma Gandhi's town in India. It's on the coast, northwest coast. And I came to London when I was 10. The privilege of being born in India, I can't express to you, is immense, because it brings with it a whole DNA, a whole range of learnings, teachings, transmissions, which are, I feel, part of my being. But I love the fact that, I came to the UK London when I was 10, because it gave me the opportunity to really get deeply integrated into what I consider is a fabulous culture. And the amalgamation of the two are extremely enriching, I think, to facilitate a life of self-discovery, of, spiritual and personal evolution, I think, because the two have commonalities. There are things that they share, the two cultures, but at the same time, they also enable pathways to experiencing yourself in a way which is quite, I would say, unique. So, for example, the value of personal freedom is so ingrained in the British culture, and in the Indian culture, the value of their inner freedom. There's a value of inner peace. There's a whole range of things which if you put the two together, while as a young person, when I was trying to do just that, I rocked a huge amount of boats and upset a lot of people along the way, culturally. But I'm just grateful for that journey, and so here we are today.
Yes, here we are today. It's so interesting. I always gravitate to, especially my roots as a priest within the Chinese culture and just Eastern, culture, spirituality. I always seem to somehow create these incredible relationships with native Indians or native Middle Eastern people. It can vary from, people get very weird when they start talking about Persian versus Iranian, Iraq, and weird stuff goes on there. I just think that it's an incredible, beautiful culture. And, there's just so much to offer. There's just so many incredible ancient things that come out of the landscape that really hasn't been discovered in its entirety, not even close across the human timeline. And so you've really embodied two very incredibly sort of contemporary and ancient sort of like cultures, really, England and India. My goodness.
Yeah, and and other things along the way, companies I've worked in and so on. But one of the things that I think is probably worth mentioning is the fact that the kind of Indian I am is born into Gujarat. So I'm Gujarati, and Gujaratis are very, very hardworking, very business focused. Really, they 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 work hard, and you'll see Gujaratis everywhere in the world, in America. Doctors in every profession, around the corner, running, shops and everything. And so, that blends in really nicely with the fact that I was drawn to, working in large organizations, which in the end, it was always in technology. So corporates, from a very young age, 21 onwards. And it led me back to India, funny enough, into before the Indian IT landscape became a thing. I was among the first, very, very first, to actually start to take it out there to banks and corporates in the UK and then to Europe. And and so that kind of gave an exposure to working in a multitude of cultures. And when I went back to India, funny enough, working with India as a corporate landscape, I realized that actually, as a British Indian and Indian, the culture is quite different. um, it's actually quite different, and one has to learn how to navigate that. And just as much as I had to learn how to navigate the German landscape in business, or Swiss or American or French or Northern English or Scottish, just very different. So it's not to be taken for granted, I think, that it makes a difference what your background is and what that enables, in the journey of you as an evolving being, both spiritually as well as a as a human being.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how you've really sort of been able to communicate the difference from sort of something that's far more materialist, based, from a corporate perspective, and bringing in these ancient sort of practices to get people to be far more in tune with the now. So that's quite a mastery and art form in of itself. And how was it sort of like, what was your realization where this was the turning point where you wanted to blend the two worlds?
I think it comes from growing up in an environment where we, mantras and spirituality was always a part of my everyday life. So since I was a child, and we're all Indian children, most Indian children are taught certain things, as they grow up, to say certain mantras, also prayers, and sitting in front of a shrine. There's not an Indian home today that doesn't have a shrine at home, as I'm sure you're aware. And so it kind of began there. And I think my dad was very, very deeply into meditation, and very much, it was just in his DNA. And my mom also, but in a different way. And so I feel like it's something that was probably already there from the family environment, my grandparents, my aunts, uncles. It was all kind of steeped in this. So by osmosis partly. But when I started, growing in corporates in my 20s, I realized that actually I loved that side of me, but there was another side of me that was screaming out to um, resolve certain things from my past, to kind of question, and in asking my questions, like, how do I, why have certain things happened in my life? Why was it that way? What is it that I'm supposed to learn from that? Is there anything I need to learn? Is there something I should give? Because that karma concept has always been very integral, I feel, with me. And I honestly couldn't tell you whether I learned it, whether I heard it. It's probably a combination of the two, where we grow up kind of like, hearing certain phrases which are part of my culture, such as, when, for example, there's a saying that, when when your karma with another person is over, you know they're gone like that. you wouldn't even know that they're going to go. So it can be quite sudden. So sometimes people disappear and you say, oh, well, you know, your karmic give and take with that person is obviously completed or something. And so I kind of, you know, had that in the background, but didn't really know it consciously. And so I started to ask certain questions about, you know, my childhood, about how things had evolved, why I felt the way I felt about certain things, certain people. And I didn't have any mentors at the time. I didn't know who to go to. We were still pre-Google days. The only things I had to refer to were books. And so I was a voracious reader. And I ended up actually inadvertently being given a book by a friend. It was called Spiritual Growth by Sanaya Roman, and it's a channel book by a being called Oren. And I kind of looked at it and I thought, yeah, whatever. And then I actually picked it up in a moment of desperation one day while at the weekend at home on my couch, wondering, you know, how can I move forward with myself? And it just really shifted it really like landed in my perspective exactly where I needed it. And it was because of that I ended up meditating by myself and just sitting still and just reading the book and connecting to my higher self, or trying to connect to my higher self, whatever that thing was. And so that's how it kind of began. But I think looking back, I could not have stayed for nearly 25 years in a very hardcore business, very cutthroat business environment, without having some place to go to center on a more or less daily basis. So it was a combination of things, asking questions, but also the lifestyle that I had at the time. And very early, I realized something feels empty. Like I'm feeling empty. There's something that is, I love my work. I'm really talented. I know I have talent for this. And I'm like a glutton for punishment when it comes to challenges. And I just love the landscape because it was an opportunity to discover facets of myself, talents that I didn't know I had, but I felt I might. And so it was a combination of that, as well as needing to anchor,
Yeah.
needing to tap into something more than what I could at the time in my mid-20s.
So discovering that is an interesting realization for any seeker. And, you know, there's sort of like two facets. It's interesting you reference facets. It's like Taoist, we call it consciousness, or the mother is the diamond, and everything has a different facet that of consciousness. So yes, and that's truly, interestingly enough, probably more universal on an Eastern culture than people would like to sort of accept. It's sort of like an understanding that there's this greater sort of integrated spiritual depth, which the Western world is sort of discovering their version of it. You know, Chinese culture is very steeped in these ancient practices and realization. We have immortals and gods for pretty much everything. And you know, you understand that the spirit world is very much it's their world, and we're living in it. And understanding that and truly embodying that, realizing that, becomes far more guiding on a daily basis when you can come to that realization. I believe that the Western culture is sort of like gathering that there's something else out there that's sort of beyond this materialism, and so you know they're glomming onto spirituality and sort of like going, wow, this is really quite profound. It's come full circle back in the 60s, where you know you were getting these sort of like spiritual soldiers coming out all over the Eastern landscape to the Western world with these messages of a greater sense of knowing. And through the practices, you know, there's a variation of sort of like acceptance of what that is from a yogic sort of Buddhist. Tell us a little bit more about that. Do you follow a specific sort of like belief system? What sort of like, you know, integrates into your very essence that you're gravitating to from where you are on your own journey right now?
The more, so I've looked at so many, like yourself, you know, I've looked at various philosophies and various sacred texts. I've really gone deep into many of them. And especially in the last years, mostly in the Indian pantheon, because there is one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. Before that, I was studying up more on the Western sort of Greek, Latin, you know, even before that Egyptian. So I've kind of, when I was younger, I've studied a whole range of things, and with the Indian thinking philosophies, almost all of them end up at this field of consciousness, which, you know, whichever way you look at it, you end up in this field of consciousness, which is beyond the mind, the body, and the emotions, the feelings, and all of that, what we know, the limited version of what we know ourselves to be as a human being. And I tend to really have, not because I want to, but somehow my something is working in me, something is working itself on me rather than me working on it. And the more I allow my consciousness to show up to me, I find that there is this field of consciousness which is literally everything and nothing. It's literally where all of anything that I want can come from. And my challenge is to understand, how can I get out of my own way so that I can be more aligned with it? What is it about me, my identity, my thoughts, my beliefs that is getting in the way of connecting more into that and tapping more into that, so that I can actually create the life that is aligned with something of a bigger self, the higher self, rather than my ego, my identity. Because, you know, my ego wants to, wants to look good. My ego wants to be this big, wants to have all the statistics on social media and all the rest of it. But there's a deeper, the commitment that I have made to myself is something of a purer essence. And that commitment is so rooted in, so anchored in, that it keeps taking me back to that higher consciousness. And so that is what the ancients have called Atman, you know, that is the field of consciousness that scientists are trying to explore, called the unified field. And it's like, it has many, it's not even compartmentalized, but you might say it has many layers. And within those layers, there are those layers that we can tap into to help us on our material journey, to help us answer questions, which we may have about our life, our existence. Some of it has taken me back into, you know, instances in this life, but also beyond this lifetime, where I have strong memories or strong sort of impressions from lifetimes that continue to have a resonance and an influence in this lifetime. So the patterns continue on. So I've been looking to break those patterns. So that field is one which, simply as Atman, I'm not even talking about the all that is. I'm not even talking about the overall aspect of it, which they call Brahman or Brahman. I'm just talking about that which we can connect to as a human being with our limited nervous system and brain to process. So as everything, you can ask it questions about making money, or when should I call a certain client or a certain prospect, for best chances of getting through, anything. So it's all of this. The realm of intuition exists in there. The realm of sixth sense exists in there. The realm of higher, of consciousness and information that is already available, and consciousness, wisdom that's available, that we can stretch. If we were able to stretch the boundaries of our current consciousness, we can tap into and perhaps pull in something just beyond that to come up with something that was unpredictable as a future path.
Yeah.
help us break the predictability of a pattern. So does that resonate with you, what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it comes across all fields. That language is a little bit more contemporary for my liking. A scientific sort of like quantum sort of like language that is not ancient, like the language that you probably speak natively or have come from, as opposed to things that are very native for me, like Mandarin, the other 7, 8 generations of dialect and transformation from the Chinese culture all the way back to pictographs and oracle bone reading. But I noticed that I always like looking in people's fields and auras. What's your affinity with like Shiva of all things?
Amazing that you should ask me that.
Well, I just
Shiva is consciousness. That is consciousness. That is the all of every. I mean, that is that field.
Very strong in your field. Very strong. Like it's morphing in and out, shape shifting as I'm watching you speak to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I do have a practice of connecting every day into that. It's you might say it's a ritual that is there in my culture, and I've been
Very clear. It's like very clear.
Really amazing, and so I am very true to that, and it's part of my lineage, my family's lineage. I've been looking to understand more about it beyond the doing element with it. So that the rituals that we do are a means to connect. As you know, any ritual is simply a means to connect into a field, a space, an energy, and to invite it into your consciousness. But there comes a point when I do that because I've committed to doing that ritual because I love it and because it anchors me and it grounds me, and I enjoy it. But beyond that, the space of Shiva is phenomenal. I mean, it is that consciousness that I'm talking about. And it's the all of everything. And people, when they talk about Hinduism, they start to talk about all the gods and everything else. But essentially, it is really just that principle that Shiva is the consciousness principle, the masculine principle, and Shakti is the feminine principle. And the two together create worlds. You can't have one without the other. And, Shakti is that incredible energy, that primordial power, that feminine power, but it's not feminine in the sense that it's submissive. It's incredibly active, but the two have roles to play, and they combine together like the right hand, left hand. And people can talk about it as a dual thing, but it's not even a duality, because in its purest essence, the two are so integrated and they are so powerful together. But in order to play with infinity, in order to play with eternity, they have this little dance that they do, so they create worlds, they dissolve them, then they create again, and then there's this big bang, and we think life begins with the big bang, but in fact it's just one of the blips in time that that is a reflection or a function of Shiva and Shakti, consciousness and primordial energy, playing with each other in order to have fun, in order to kind of create, because creativity is the essence of Shakti. Yeah. And consciousness is the seeds of everything. So the two combine, and then we get flourishing walls, whether we like them or not. That's a whole other ball game.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence of that is mind blowing, and the more you speak on it, the stronger your aura emanates, and the shape shifting of that particular spirit is huge. And so
Wow.
when you mentioned Shakti, it like emanates, which is really strange, like blue flames all up and down your aura. And
Wow.
and the brightest emanation of what we call the upper dantian is coming from here. So regardless of whether you ever have these moments where you believe you're in your corporate self and it's a little perplexing, the intellect, I could assure you, your intuitive sense of knowing will never leave you. It's only getting stronger, and it's quite frankly burning my retinas right now. Um, there's a lot of transmission coming from you, but it's sort of like that when I speak of monologue to dialogue. And so, what's really important is the Jade Emperor always reminds us, one of my teachers, when you accept you know nothing, you know everything. And furthermore, when you realize and understand all thoughts of your mind are not yours, it makes life very easy.
Absolutely. And also, I think the more we experience these various dimensions, the more we realize how little we know. And it's just so humbling, which is one of the reasons why I've taken so long to actually put myself out there as such, talking on podcasts and so on, because there's this part of me that says, gosh, I don't know anything, relative to how much I can see, I don't know. And I think there is that. And I think that's probably part of the path, is that at some point when you realize how tiny a blip we are, here on this planet, and how much more there is of us out, uncontained in this little body, the more we realize it's like, my God, people think they know so much, but actually, my goodness, how little we know, and how we insist we know the truth. That's the scary thing to me, is when people insist that their perspective and their point of view is the real point of view, whatever it might be, whether we're talking about religion, spirituality, climate change, anything. It's just
Well,
phenomenal to me that people can feel that they have the answer. It's like, wow, that's incredible that you have the answer, because I certainly don't have the answer.
well, it's more, there are a million ways up the mountain, and there is no right or wrong way from a Taoist perspective. And it's so beautiful hearing you talk about the serenade sort of fluidity that comes with the Shiva and Shakti unity. And, that's pretty much the embodiment of yin and yang. We don't see anything as good and bad. It's yin and yang. And so, when we are moving into circles where people are dealing with spirit entities or things of that nature that have been generated at a low frequency, identified more as Hollywood, or something that is shaped into something that you would create sort of some ominous view of, this is the tuning fork. One of my lineages, the founder of that lineage was a renowned exorcist. And so these are rituals that I've been doing for 30 years. Now, 30 years ago, when I was doing this stuff, people were coming to me with potential, what they've been diagnosed as psychotic episodes. And, you go through processes through the circle of realizing what is a distraction, what is this humanistic expression of human consciousness that is limiting you and then trapping you in this sort of stepping in and out of both worlds realization. And of course, the healing that comes with that, the becoming whole, returning to what you know, returning to remember who you really are. And then today, I may not even see someone like that. They'll wake up and, I'm channeling the Palladians. Let me start a YouTube channel and get 100,000 followers. Hey, look, I think it's amazing that there is an awakening that's taking place. And, 30 years ago, my hobby was seeking out so-called psychics and having conversations with them. And then I end up giving them a reading and heal them from their misguided path of, being the charlatan. And today I can, with great confidence, realize that here in America, we call it Yelp. They'll look up Yelp. There'll be 500 healers, 500 psychics, 500 mediums, 500 channelers, and they're for real. They have a part of that facet that we speak of, the spiritual consciousness, that is absolutely dead on accurate. I think the biggest misfortune is that people start their developed consciousness journey, and then they they fall short of a practices or a method to develop these skills so they equalize. So within Taoism, you want to, when I look at when I do a psychic reading on someone, it's about reading the energy centers. Now, in your system, you're very familiar with chakras. We just call them dantians within Taoism. They're energy fields. The Dan is the field, the energetic potential. And I just read them like a menu. It's sort of like the present moment. And that's why I always go, do you want a reading? And people are like, yeah, sure, give me a reading. I'm like, really, honestly, do you want one?
You're going to be careful asking somebody who really knows.
Well, yeah, and I always start at the bottom. So I start with the earth energy, and then I move up to what you would consider your root chakra. And then by the time I get to the sexual energy, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can stop. You can stop about now. And when you understand that it's this present moment, the information is sitting there. For me, I see the auras, I see the energies, I see the information is just sitting there on the person. It's kind of like being that old expression, you're the only person that can see the Emperor's new clothes. And you're like, what's going on here? And it's a developmental skill. I like to teach people that these abilities are accessible to everyone. You just have to find a method that is actually repeatable, that is self-evident. It has to be materialized, realizing that we're really sitting in this place of understanding that if we're observing a 3D reality, you're already in the fourth dimension. And so from a quantum perspective, from a scientific perspective, that fourth dimension is evident by you being able to observe the third dimension. So now you're sort of like teeter-tottering on accessing this next level of consciousness if you accept this as a model of understanding, which I think a lot of people, and we had this conversation earlier, it's like, there's a million ways to do this. I've never seen, I always look at every day when I wake up, the student is the teacher is the student. And if you embody that, you'll forever be expanding your consciousness. If you, just as you mentioned before, it's a little concerning to me when someone has an absolute truth. My personality steps back for a minute and says, okay, well, how do we perceive that? How have you created this absolute truth? Because I can give you 1,000 different ways to get up the mountain. And the amount of people I've interviewed that are tuned into this state of consciousness as we speak of, in your case, the Shiva, so potent, my goodness. Woo, I'm getting high. This is awesome. And it's a facet that you have embodied, that you have brought in from past lives, bringing you to this point. If you believe that, this is evident from all the things that I'm trained in, that I can see all these things. Now, that could be another facet of a multidimensional reality, because things are operating all at once. So you could have there's a whole nother path for you 1,000,000 times over, 1,000,000,000,000 times over, an infinite amount of times over. It's what you're resonating with right now, and it's creating this awareness. Yet it doesn't have to be limited to. So I think a lot of people tend to get caught up in this is the absolute. Now, it's interesting. You spoke on karma, because within Taoism, we don't really use the karmic model. We use it more within magic. And it's more to the detriment of the person receiving the magic, because it's predicated on perceiving what you consider as dualistic. So, if you're subject to the human condition, which is this perception of reality, and you're still on your journey to embody that as a whole, within Taoism, each side of the mountain is yin and yang. You merge it together to come as one, realizing the Wu Ji, the stillness between the breath in and the breath out, which is yin and yang, is that stillness, which we call the mother, which we identify as the mother of all things, the Tao. And so I really find it really beautiful, your relationship with the Shakti and the Shiva, and that, this is embodiment. It's almost like this a different version, two of the same. Yin and Yang, Shakti, Shiva. They're so beautiful to observe this, and it is. There's, when you merge it as one, it's still, there's those components are still individually identified as the most potent representation of this consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, totally, totally. And it's interesting when you were talking about the yin and the yang, you were talking about you referred to the area of the breath, the entry of the breath. And that's another thing which as a yogi and on the yogic path, that's something very, very sacred. The breath, the rising of the breath, the falling of the breath, inhale from the right, exhale from the left, and the other way around. That in the central channel of the spine, while of course the subtle energies are there in the spine, but they're more, amplified in the subtle body as chakras, as there I think the breath is really key, because again, Shiva Shakti, feminine, masculine, the primordial principle of consciousness and energy, the two are always playing within our microcosm of the body, just as much as they are in the macrocosm out there. So I the more I learn about it, the more I realize how incredibly sacred it is. The breath is incredibly sacred. And this is where, I don't know if I'm sure you know Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda's, the autobiography of a yogi. He brought um, the knowledge of Kriya Yoga into the West. And Kriya Yoga is something that I do practice. And you have to be initiated. It's best if you're initiated by a guru of a lineage. I don't believe in gurus per se, but for this particular thing, there are certain things I think you should be, because the genuine guru will work with you, when you're meditating, when you're in that practice. And the whole of the Kriya practice is based on the breath. And it's visualizing the third eye, bringing the light in, going all the way down into the spine, and rise and fall of the breath. And that is Shiva Shakti. That is Shiva Shakti. Shakti glides down, Shiva rises up. Shakti glides down, Shiva rises up. So it's that, and just that practice can make a profound difference in one's evolution. Burning away of past residues, whatever they may be, past lives or this life or whatever, that which does not serve you on your commitment to growing exponentially as a conscious being through the human body, through the human experience. So Kriya Yoga is not too well understood in the main out there, but it is understood by those who understand, and those who practice know that it is profound. It's actually really profound.
Yeah, I've had many conversations with Kriya Yoga practitioners, and one specifically comes to mind, and he's part of a community that was created back in the 70s here in America, out in California. He's lived there since then.
Amazing.
Beautiful little community. He actually invited me out there at some point. I should go out there and just check it out, because that's part of a driving force of what I'm doing here, is creating something greater, and ultimately our school of understanding for all ages is a part of the directive from my teachers to share with the world a deeper understanding and nature of reality using these practices. Because again, you've made such a great point. I have yet to see anyone in the Western world or anywhere that can expose the deep sort of like cultivating practices of Taoist alchemy, which is what I specialize in. And it's fragmented. There's a lot of people that have stolen bits and pieces, and you feel sort of disheartened, like you had 3 pieces to a treasure map and you can't find the 4th one, because it's all disjointed, and there's a process where you hand it down from generation to generation. It has for thousands of years. I enhance a lot of the stuff that have given to me from my monasteries, and I go directly to source. The highest access for a Taoist is pure source. Divination is channeling. That's it. You can't get any higher than that. And your direct source information will be self-evident, and it will be translated into what what is being created, what is altering perfection, this tapestry that is really distortion in this 3D reality due to our attention intention, has slowed things down, has taken things from light, wave, matter, particle, and realized to what you perceive in this materialistic sort of expression very slow. And you are sort of like navigating through that. And when I transmit chi, Tao, the mother, which is pure source, it's a whole different, it's stuff from this electromagnetic spectrum. It's whole, and you'll experience it, and it'll create instant manifestation, magic, healing, things of that nature. So there's the resonance that is present. And I love the way you mentioned that earlier, because there's a process. So when you identify everything is energy, the energy has a vibration. That vibration has a frequency. That frequency, once met and able to hold that, this is what we identify as a resonance. If you can hold that resonance, then it will become realized. And I think this is sort of the premise of a lot of new age materialistic sort of generated manifestor teachers, mentors. They hold that as a way to captivate someone's attention. And so in essence, manifestation is one component. Within Taoist alchemy, it's a component that generates and realizes, specific magic practices, which consist of the construct of incantations, talismans. Some people might call it mantras, mudras, hand seals, specific frequencies. So you're moving the energy around from the aspect of, an incantation that also has a construct within those words. So the linguistics within that, as it lays down on the paper, you're adding elements that then construct something that's quite palpable, and it has a directive. And that's really what manifestation within a magic sort of process is, right? So
I totally resonate with you on that. That's what we're manifesting all the time. We don't know we're manifesting all the time. We're just not consciously manifesting all the time, right? So we then end up with stuff we don't want. But what you're talking about is conscious manifestation, where you're using energy particularly and directing it and having it show up in a certain form that we want. Let's say somebody wants a certain thing, then it shows up like that. And it's very much, I'm sure that Hermes Trismegistus and so on, they took, those teachings from the East and, brought that into the Kabbalion and so on and so on. I'm pretty sure that that's what it is, because it is just the alchemy of, of that day, more recent sort of history from the Greeks, and mostly from the Greeks and possibly even from the Egyptians. I think the Egyptians got some stuff from the Indians, think the Greeks also, but also from China and so on. So I can completely resonate with that. Nowadays, we talk about manifestation like it's a new thing. It's just what happens with energy and what we do with that.
I think it's so refreshing that you observe that intuitively, because so many people are holding the torch now. It's very, very spiritually popular that, everything was derived from sort of like Anunnaki, sort of Egyptian-based sort of like origins. And I can appreciate that. Again, that's an absolute, forewarned, absolute red flag. There are many different ways up the mountain. I would have to agree with you, perhaps maybe being biased, that these deep ancient practices have come from the East, from India, from China, and they sort of transmute and translated into what you perceive as an offering today. And, personally, when I go into conference with my teachers, one being the Yellow Emperor, and I channel this. I mean, channeling is something that I stepped into 30 years ago. And so my teacher had 60 years experience, and I had one session and channeled Lutzu, and he's been my teacher to this very moment. And there is a visceral thing that takes place as you are opening yourself up to a different dimension, and basically feels like a massive portal, a laser beam of divine golden white light that permeates your whole physical body. I become basically a beacon. And so at that time, including the teacher, I had 20 students standing around me with sticks and marshmallows, cooking their marshmallows, because there's so much heat that transmits from that connection.
Wow.
And it happens today, when I do, and I mean, he speaks through me pretty much. I can guarantee you, I have no great ideas or thoughts of any kind. The information is just handed to me. It's bizarre when you experience it. You're just literally inside. You're observing it all, and I'm like, wow, I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Wow, it's not my information. It never happened.
You get out of the way. Well, see, the thing is, here's what, when you ask me about, what do I resonate with in terms of philosophies and so on, what I experience as a knowing is that in that field of consciousness, beings have been and they've gone. Where do they go? They don't go anywhere. They're still there. So, they are still there, and they still have the same DNA, and they themselves are growing, they themselves are expanding. But there are those who are teachers, there are those who are philosophers, there are those who are scientists. And what do they do with that information? Where do they go with that? They come to, in some cases, some of them still have that connection with our planet, and they want to, still share that, and still, and somebody needs to receive that information. They need to be appropriately ready, physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychically, etc., and mature to be able to receive something and to understand they're receiving, to understand, that this is coming from somewhere. Now, that being that we knew then as Lao Tzu, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but as that being, we knew him in that guise at that time. But out of body, he's a being, he's a consciousness, that is a vast, greater version of himself, itself, however we want to express. We don't have language to express this consciousness. So I have absolutely no doubt what you're saying. It's when I doubt it, when people say they channel this, that, or the other. Yes. Well, how well are they embodying something? Because it's a question of embodiment. And so that's when you distinguish, and I think it's important to be able to discern who is authentic and who is not, as you mentioned earlier. And the only way to do that is how much are they embodying something of the energy that they talk about? Because it's evident. They don't have to talk about it in a ancient language or any kind of language. The essence is there and it speaks for itself. And then they have to find a way of expressing that so that other people can relate to it. Like that knowledge, that information. It's like speaking Japanese or another language. If somebody doesn't understand what you're saying, if it doesn't land in their world. I talk to you about some very deep Indian Sanskrit concept, which is so alien into that American, world, then you kind of lost it. So you need to be able to transmit and translate and all of that in language. But sometimes it doesn't matter because you are just transmitting the energy and the frequency. So that's what people need the most. As I mentioned before we came on, last a couple of weeks ago on a Friday evening, we had this live event. And I was privileged to have the CEO of one of the biggest spiritual meditation organizations in the world, 140 centers, 140 countries, 8,800 centers in those countries. And, people loved it. And what it was really, while we were being interviewed by a BBC presenter, a former BBC presenter, she and I, really what was going on in the room was some sort of a transmission. Really, that's what was happening. And that's always what's happening when we gravitate towards teachers, people, certain individuals. And of course, we did meditation. We did all of that. We brought them into themselves to be able to experience for themselves their own essence. So anything which is, in my view, authentic in this context of spirituality is something that brings the person that you're communicating with to their own true self.
Mm.
That's what that essence does.
Mm.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. You know, it's two things are taking place. You're either contracting or expanding, and that visceral kinesthetic response is an indicator of where you're at in your own journey. Now, it can be commandeered at a lower level within the construct of the human condition, and that's why practice is developing a cultivational practice is so very important for fortifying the foundation. That's why when I teach Qigong, or which Ni Dan, internal alchemy, it's like as tangible as your physical form within the energetic processes within your physical body, and then you're able to discern and affirm what is really taking place, and you will start to raise and expand the dial so that you're not sort of caught up in the human condition, because that is where, as I like to tell people, your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. And most people are like, whoa, that is, whoa. Well, this is very ancient, and understanding that, you know, right from Jade Emperor, let the man who's never left his village, let him know that he has seen the world, because it's all here. You don't have to go anywhere. It's all there. And that is all self-evident as you start to wind things up, like within I imagine within your practices. Kundalini is something that you speak on in relation to the energetic potential. Now, I've trained with many people, travel the world, I teach my stuff, people come from all over the world to come here and train. There is a level of pulpability. Kundalini is an interesting one to get into. I've only ever come across 2 Kundalini masters, and that's what I understand and know to be true, what Kundalini really embodies. And they can levitate, stop their heart, do superhuman sort of like Marvel stuff. And I think that people need to understand the potential of a Kundalini awakening, and then what you really have to embody to cultivate and develop that to its entirety. What are your thoughts on that processes?
So I think all of the spiritual processes, the genuine, authentic spiritual processes that we talk about and that people practice, fundamentally, they are always, Kundalini is the Shakti, Kundalini Shakti. That is the primordial feminine, And so all of the practices that we talk about are really about somehow bringing an integration of being able to hold that energy, being able to express that energy, being able to experience it. And you can't have evolution without it. So, the Kundalini aspect, I mean, you can approach it from Kundalini, practices, but yoga is truly about detoxing the mind, the body, the aspect of the soul, the jivatman, that came with all kinds of memories and all kinds of impressions from previous existences that didn't quite clear in each of the incarnations, perhaps. And so really, that's what the yogic process is. This is why we meditate. This is why we do the breath practices. So Kriya Yoga is a Kundalini practice. Kriya Yoga is Kriya Kundalini Yoga. And that's why I said that it's a good idea to have a knowledgeable guru, a master who knows how to guide you, because sometimes the practice is so strong that, things happen in the outside. Well, I got up from a practice the other day and suddenly there was so much power and energy that it was explosive. It was literally if I wasn't emotionally self-aware, it could have been very dangerous. And that's the reason why it's important to understand that we also need to work on our emotions. So the yoga masters, for Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, I'm pretty sure you will have heard of that particular text. Patanjali was a sage, they say 300 to 500 BC. And he's like, I don't know, he's an incredible, phenomenal being, because how he could have done all that stuff, he could have left us with the knowledge that he's left us. So he basically took the practices of yoga that were around at the time, the knowledge. And by the way, I don't mean yoga as in just asanas, not the physical, because in India, yoga is understood to be the union of the who we are as a I say as a human with our higher being. So that's essentially yoga. It's a union of the two. It's bringing the two together. And so what he said in the second sutra and the third sutra, that there are like 192 aphorisms. And I've actually had the privilege of editing the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras from my Kriya Guru, which is like God asking you to, translate the Bible or something. It's such an incredible privilege to do that.
Hang on, I got to interrupt you. You said 192
aphorisms.
And what did
I may have got the number wrong. It may be 150 something, but they're basically threads. They're threads of, they're basically very short sentences, like Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha, or when he says.
The reason it brings my attention is because there's 192 amino acids within the growth hormone chain within the human body. So it's very, very interesting
to see
that number. Again, we have these epiphanies, right?
Yeah, and my phone is off right now. Otherwise, I would double check. So the number of sutras, I always forget for some reason. And I think it's 192. But the point being that each one, so that text is literally tells you how you go from being the human being to being your highest, the divinity, the divine essence of your highest possible self. And it does so in short codified sentences. So you need to unravel them. And the first one he says, and now we begin the practice of yoga. And so I think, and basically what it means is now we begin the discipline of yoga. Anushasan is one of the three words used in that. And so it's a discipline, and the discipline is for a human being, the discipline of understanding the second sutra, which is Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is that yoga is basically the chitta, all the stuff that goes around in our mind, all the mind stuff, all the mind monkey stuff. It just whirls around, it whirls around, it whirls around ceaselessly. And we need to bring somehow an interruption to that. So we need to interrupt that whirlpool of the mind so that we can begin the process of yoga. And without that, you're never going to have the union, or like the higher and the lower. You're never going to go beyond the duality. You never experience the knowing of that unified state of our existence. So that's already in the second sentence. He says that. And the third sentence is really about what happens when you do that, which is you're still the mind. The mind calms down. The mind calms down, the thoughts, the emotions, as you mentioned earlier. We need to master the emotions. So that this idea of self-mastery has been coming along through the ages. So we need to master the mind. What does it mean to master the mind? Well, we need to master the fact that we have this whirlpool. The mind does its stuff, and it's not our stuff necessarily. It's just stuff. Sometimes we hook into it. It's a bit like a river is running through, and there are leaves in the river that are floating around, and you kind of try and catch a leaf and then another leaf, and each one is a thought that you think is your own. And sometimes it is your own, but sometimes it's collective. It's conditioning. It's whatever we brought with us. But we need to discern what is real in that whirlpool and what is not. Until we can do that, we are not ever going to be able to have that calmness, that steadiness of the mind to discern. So that's really just the first three sentences of the Yoga Sutras. But when you do that, then you begin the practice of the discipline that we need to develop in order to find that oneness, go beyond the duality.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just so magical. It's the same within Taoism. I just finished transcribing the 2024 version of the Tao Te Ching with Lao and published it. And we consider, and what it is truly what we call the magical register. So each verse is an incantation. Each incantation has levels of consciousness that you develop, and it also has a frequency that you tune into. And so there's an activation that takes place where the words come off the page, they swirl around you and drop into your heart center. And so there's this visceral thing, just like the awareness, me sharing that with you, and you getting that little charge of like, oh yeah, I got you. I'm picking up what you're putting down, because you understand the validity of that. You have validated yourself. Discern, affirm through the experience, through the tuning of your own awareness within this environment. Within Taoism, there are 9 stages to enlightenment. It starts with the physical, then you have the energetic, then the spiritual, and then it goes into the sun, the earth, the moon, and finally, it ends with oneness, ultimate, and then being all things. So these 9 states of development create where we're at in our own journey. But it's like being 100% conscious, or what a dear friend of the channel, James Tooney, would say, spiritual conscious, is so critical. I feel like there's this underlying sort of like attempt to manipulate and commandeer people's consciousness or unconscious within the wordsmithing of linguistics. And so when people start using, terms like conscious agency, there is a separation from the individual. It's almost very much traits of why people are disappointed with something as simple as the Secret, and why it was so disappointing for most people was because one of the most fatal flaws of it was asking the seeker what is their value system. So when you're asking that, you are separating yourself. You're identifying as the reflection of the image that's looking back at you in the mirror, this flesh and blood. Whereas to acquire a state of consciousness, to cast magic, healing, manifestation, you must be this present moment. You're no place, person, or thing. You're just now. And to do that requires an awareness, an observation of this now. So it goes from a dialogue to a monologue. If you're having a monologue, you are the now. You're not asking yourself if universe, can you help me acquire a manifestation? Can you help me heal? You are the universe. So when you think it is done. When you accept it as the Tao, all things are realized. And I think this is a journey for seekers to develop those skills. And again, I really appreciate when you're identifying that you need to find someone to help you develop these skills. This is why it's so important for me to help people remember who they really are. And to do that, there's a developmental skill. It's a mastery, a method of cultivation. And I think most people end up getting caught up in, I had the epiphany. I was able to give someone a psychic reading or a physical healing or a myriad of different things that can take place when you start getting a taste of this different state. Yet then it can't be repeatable. So you have this sort of like, this.
That's
Hey,
the challenge, isn't it? That's the challenge. Yeah.
right.
When you're in that state of oneness and you're tapping into that and you're channeling that. So I say channeling, the word has been so maligned. I almost don't want to use it because I think it's been messed up, with all kinds of meaning that is condescending, not what it's intended for. But let's use the word channeling for the want of a better word. So when you're channeling that energy on it, that energetic, that knowledge, and then sometimes it's just an energy, sometimes it's language, sometimes it's both. Then I think it is the challenge to repeat that. People often say to me, like, "Oh, that was so amazing what you just said. Say it again." Like, what did you don't remember because actually I wasn't thinking about saying, I wasn't percolate. I wasn't processing it in my brain per se. I was literally just getting it out. And so it's interesting what you're saying. I totally resonate with that. That it's unique. It's a unique experience almost every time, unless you record it.
Well, yeah, the actual channeling transmission, 100%. Now, cultivating practices of separating electric from magnetic in a Nigong process is very repeatable. The individual transmission, I will never know what Lutzu was going to say next. It's just he comes out and he makes me look real good. But generally speaking, from a healing manifestation magic perspective, these practices are very repeatable when you're given the right cultivational practice.
Yeah, at some level you need to be able to do that. But I could get they're unique every time as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, when 2024 came around, a lot of people were coming to Lutzu asking, well, what's the answer? What's going on? Are we going to have brimstone and fire coming out of the sky? And they were very disappointed because they came from a fear-mongering sort of like perspective. And Lutzu was very clear. He's a little cheeky. I got to be honest. He's a little cheeky. He's like, oh, just imagine you're like a grain of sand. Asking the beach what you're doing today. What are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized. And I was just like, whoa, just like the charge you got right now. It's like, you can't make this stuff up. Now, you can go on and on and on. Quite frankly, I could sit in concert with him and for days. If I didn't need sustenance or food or water, he would just keep going, and then other teachers would come in and they would get. That's how I transcribed the Tao Te Ching. Something that would be someone's life work, I think, took me 2 hours. And when you read it, you're like, holy, this is visceral. This is magical. It is a kinesthetic, full body vibratory experience, because as it should be, it's part of the ancient practice that we cultivate. And so, I do believe, I agree with you, the channeling aspect, having done this for 30 years consciously. I had a friend of the channel, David Verdesi, who's been a seeker for 30 years also, and he's gone around and he's trained under a bunch of masters across the globe, some that I've experienced and trained under myself. And there's this old school stuff we used to do with channeling back in the day. I can basically, when you're transmitting that chi, which is not from this electromagnetic spectrum, it's perfection. Everything in this realm is altered. It is not perfection. For you to have it return to the true nature of who you are, there is a different, it's a completely different, it's perfection. It's a different wave of light. It's completely different. Some people might refer to it as a scalar wave, 0 point, the unified theory field of understanding how the entanglement of what quantum physics really means. But that would be then referencing things more like a black hole energy, which, again, once you hit the event horizon of a black hole, that is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And it is not the ominous void that just sucks people into the abyss. It's actually endless. So that is a different, it's not from this world. It's a different
I think they're even discovering that now in science. They're learning more and more about the black hole and how it functions. So you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot we know intuitively. There's a lot the masters knew back in the day, and they've shared that with us already. And now it's incredible. How did they know? How did they? There must have been a race. I don't know, a handful of people that were somehow special. I don't know. But they knew, and now we're kind of finding sometimes, science catches up with some of the stuff. Still hasn't a lot of it.
Well, I mean,
entanglement, for example, the theory of entanglement, for example, that's a really interesting theory that can explain many, many things in terms of intuition, in terms of why is it that two people can have the same thought at the same time? How is it two people can not have met, but when they meet, there is this incredible, coming together and so on. So I think that theory has a lot of legs.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I was just going to bring attention to within Taoism, we have the specific activation of the middle dantian, which you would call the heart chakra. And there's 81 chambers in the middle dantian. We have an internal alchemy practice where we witness the death of a star, the raising of the red phoenix, which is the spirit energy that protects and embodies the middle dantian, which would be the heart chakra. And then you reveal the black hole energy. And yeah, and that charge you got right now is an indication. Now, I have a student, many students, some of them have been using the practices and training with me for decades. One of them specifically has a PhD, he was doing a research paper on the nucleus of a cell. And he comes to me one day and goes, Jifu, you wouldn't believe what I found. I got this research paper and I was studying the nucleus of a cell. You wouldn't believe what I found in it. Please tell me. Black hole energy. I was like, what a coincidence.
Infiniteness.
It just never, that chill we're sharing, it never stops. And this is stuff that we've done about. Now I go right to my teachers, and this goes right back to the Yellow Emperor's affinity with the universe as he came down from a celestial, riding a celestial dragon from the sun, what we would call the old sun, and entered into Earth's plane, laid on the floor, basically attached to the Earth, magnetized to the Earth for 18 days and nights, downloading all the information of Chinese culture as you know it today, the inner alchemy, Taoism, Chinese medicine, everything you can think of was generated from the Yellow Emperor's affinity, from the whispers of the universe. And this is where you get the real stuff. And so whenever I'm actually bringing out not a coffee table book, but basically every immortal that are my teachers, there's over 171 of them, and they all have their own stories of information, and people find it fascinating to be able to access that. And there's a much deeper, when I can go into to conference with them, just as I'm speaking to you, for days and get direct, and people freak out. They're like, this stuff is real. You can feel it. Yeah, this is not just someone rambling off some sort of like nonsense. You will experience it on a visceral level, as it should be. This is the most powerful indication of what it is that we speak of. But, you know, in the Tao Te Ching would be very, very much like the sutras that you spoke about earlier, is this guided understanding of how to acquire a state of awareness, giving the human being insight into returning to that level of consciousness. That consciousness, for me right now, I'm having an epic time moving through the universe, sampling all the stars, the sun, and what most people would consider an out-of-body experience. This is my daily practice. I'm doing it right now while talking to you. A new version of what we call multitasking. Now, this is having a visceral effect from head to toe. I'm experiencing all the properties and the energetic potential of each star element, the universe, because it's tapped in. Now the backdrop of my reality is nothing but void. And only when things become present do they materialize into something. So it's like just having a blank screen. When I merge into it, whether it's given to me by information or there's an entity or whatever, there's no, I'm not sure what this is. Now, I'm very clear on what this is. And so when you transmute it from a consciousness level, say, for example, and I always, when I develop these skills in others, it's like, okay, go and create a thought form. Like, just think about something that you just want to manipulate. You know, in most cases, guys go to some type of like graphic scene of something, and they're like, I can't do it. I'm like, oh, no. Well, go ahead. Create your wildest fantasies. I cannot do it anymore because it dissolves. It's like lighting a match, and the imagery dissolves. Now, if they make that same thought process and attach it to their wife, their girlfriend, an intimate relationship that's nourishing and developing the unconditional love and acceptance that comes with this present moment, they can do anything they want with that imagery, that creativity, because you're now tuning back to a charge that would be representative of where people go, oh, the honeymoon is over. No, everything's energy, frequency, vibration. You can, every day I wake up, I look at my wife as if it's the first time I've ever seen her. And that love is embodied on my second basis, and it's translated into my 6 beautiful children. This is part of my reality. This is what I live on a daily basis. And everyone, part of their journey is, don't erase your personality. It's what's been given to you in your humanist realization. But generally speaking, this is part of when you master the state you're in, which is the first thing that we do within Taoism, is master the emotional state. You put it aside like your personality, and you are the present moment. So you can tell it to sit, roll over, play dead in the corner of the room. This is a skill set. And when people attempt to virtue signal and want to manipulate by going, oh, God, I took the shirt off my back. I gave my last $5 to a bum. I'm here. Give me everything. Why did I not have all the... You're virtue signaling. You're manipulating something that is an acquisition of developmental cultivation. You don't have to destroy yourself to be realized. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There were so many layers. If I was interviewing you, I would have 10 questions, 10 discussion points just to hop into with what you've been saying. I mean, what you're really saying is, there are certain skills that we can learn in order that we can actually access certain states. And they are skills. They are things that need to be developed, learned. We need to train our nervous system to be able to attune to that and to receive and interact with that. And then what I heard you say when it comes to, your relationship with your wife is, you said wife, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Your relationship with your wife and how you see her every day as a new person, because you got that actually there is no real, there is a past, but in reality, that human being is a different human being to the one who went to bed the night before, because you don't know where they've been. You don't know what they've been learning, what's been going on. And, in communication relationship circles, like coaching circles, there is a skill that one can teach partners, to look at each other and to actually listen to each other as if they don't know. Like, I don't know what they're going to say today, but we often don't do that because we have human beings crystallized as this is it, this is how they are, this is the way it is, rather than the fact that they are themselves evolving there's something different, sometimes significantly, sometimes marginally, but we want to relate to them like we just met them, so that we can grant them the honor of interacting with the amazing being that they are. And maybe in that moment they're not being amazing, but we still want to listen. We still want to grant them that space, that clearing, so we can hear them, and we can really listen to what they're saying. We can actually get them, rather than coming from that perspective of, that's a skill for sure. But actually what you're saying is that when you develop that skill, so much more becomes available. Much more becomes available beyond just a skill, like again, a thing to do.
Oh no, it's a whole new reality,
Whole new realm.
And I think a lot of people get limited by the construct. They read a metaphysical sort of like description of the energy body, the etheric body, the astral body, and it can be very problematic, in my opinion. It's just like if you come from biology, neurology, psychology, physiology, you're limited.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed with your incredible understanding and embodiment is you're taking in all this stuff and realizing it as that present moment, as we speak of, and being able to share it with the people that need it the most, and within your space. So let's speak a little bit. I've got to we're probably going to end this conversation in a minute or two, unfortunately. I would like a part 2, actually. I'm just starting that out to you right now. What is the the best construct that you have in your own developmental skills? So when you start starting out with someone and giving a seeker a better understanding, what would you use?
I'm beginning to realize more and more that the power of the breath is so little understood. It's understood. And I keep bringing people to the breath. In my yoga practices, when I teach yoga on a daily basis, when I'm driving, I just keep bringing myself to the breath. And what happens is a world within worlds, exponential worlds open up. There's this calm, this peace at a physical level, at the level of the nervous system. Because I think the challenge is, San, you are so evolved. You've evolved yourselves to such an extent that you are able, like when you were talking about, experiencing the stars and the moon a while ago simultaneously to talking to me, I was there with you. I actually was participating in that experience with you. And I think that we tend to forget that most people still are very attached to the body, the human system, and don't realize that really we are at the behest of our nervous system, and we're at the behest of our hormones, unfortunately. The stuff and we really need to learn to find a way very quickly, without having any complicated practices. We need to find a way of calming down, finding peace instantly in any situation. And I think there is no faster access than the breath, than just tuning into the breath, just allowing the body to breathe, and just saying, breathing, just one breath, another breath, third breath. And I'm finding that simple access, because it's available to everybody. You don't have to be spiritual, you don't have to be metaphysical, you can be anything you as a human being, and it's accessible, it's applicable, relevant for you. So when we tap in, when we start to just focus on the breath just for 5-10 breaths consciously, because we don't breathe consciously, we are doing it on automatic, immediately we get access to something more. First, we need to calm the whole human system down. We really need the thoughts, the whirlpool of the mind, all the extra senses, the 5 senses are constantly at play. And then I think when we can begin to practice being at peace with ourselves, like really just allowing things externally, internally, everywhere to be as it is in the moment, in the now, then I have found that people, doesn't matter if they're not spiritual, they have this amazing access to experiencing a state of being, like just being present. And that state of being present is nothing more than what you have been talking about, we've been talking about, is experiencing that state of who we are beyond our limited body and mind and emotions and feelings and so on. So when that happens, magic begins to happen of its own accord, because we've interrupted the cycle of what we know, and we allow something beyond the known to start. That is the higher being, the higher self, that aspect of your consciousness that is beyond the mind and the body, to start to interact with you a little bit more. You make some space for it to kind of give you a little bit of an inkling of something else. Or maybe I want to sit longer in this situation. I want to breathe a bit more. Maybe I want to sit still a bit longer. Maybe it's not that important that somebody said something nasty to me about me. Maybe it's not that important. And then we begin to shift our perspectives, and all of that simply by developing a conscious relationship to the breath.
That's amazing. I really, really enjoyed our conversation today, and it's really refreshing to be able to speak with someone that has such an incredible insight into ancient practices and embodying them, and to a level where you are just on the precipice of realizing your true immortal self on a second by second basis. Just a little heads up there for you, my friend. It's was really quite something. I want the audience, my students, anyone who is following this channel, I want you to go out, OGs, the 126, and I want you to visit all social media and your website. That's all going to be put under this podcast. Now, is there a specific service that you offer to people right now that they can come and find you? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to coaching. I take on very certain specific people, just because of the time sort of constraint with various things that I'm doing. So that's available. What I will say about my content is I am really doing my best to bring that information in a very accessible way, so that people are not made to lose themselves in language, in modalities, and so on. My interest is really doing what I just mentioned, which is connecting people to their innate essence. Because if we can do that, I think the job is done. Then they will find their way as they develop, and we can go take them deeper. We can take them higher, but that's really what I'm offering. And if you find my content on social media, very often I'm so trying very hard to give it to a Gen Z person in a way which is they can understand, or a person such as yourself. Hopefully hopefully I'm weaving in layers that it will still resonate with somebody as advanced and as evolved in your practices and your awareness as you are. So for me, it's really about connecting people. So yeah, so my social media content, I do my best to make it as worldly and as accessible as possible. It's a hard job because it's much easier, as when something is integrated in you, to kind of then articulate it in a way, in a contemporary way. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit one of my addictions is wordsmithing with scholars and things of that nature. So I tend to avoid that, but sometimes I'm drawn into it, and I do enjoy that sort of like conversation. But I much prefer articulating it in a way where it's a universal understanding, not something that ends up, you sitting there with a thesaurus and a dictionary working out what exactly it is that someone just said.
Yeah.
I find it can be very empowering, but most of those conversations fall on deaf ears, because majority of people
it goes above their head. But that's why it's refreshing for me to have this conversation with you, because somebody who gets it without having to explain certain things that are experiential. I think that's the challenge that we're really talking about, is that when we're talking about evolution in the realm of what can only be experienced, and trying to language that, we sometimes lose people along the way because we didn't use the right words, or we didn't use the right phrases, or didn't resonate with the current modern vernacular or whatever. So that's why it's really refreshing for me to just to kind of be in the conversation without the need to explain where did that concept come from, or what sutra is that, or what which text did that come from, which line was it. It's nice.
Yeah, and it's self-evident. All the BS in the world, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it more often than not. As an observer, as a seeker, they will come across your material, my material, and they'll be like, I want more, because it resonates with me. Everything has a resonating effect on you as a micro of a macro. And so this conversation today was just amazing, and I'm very grateful that you were able to share your time with me and the audience. And I really want to thank you. I will ask you in closing, what is your definition of consciousness?
I just want to say, I'm so, this is like music to my soul. I'm so grateful for this conversation, and for having me on your amazing growing channel. Look forward to seeing more of your content and having more conversations like this. What is consciousness to me? Consciousness is I will use the word so that we can actually, relate to it. It's literally an ocean or a field infinitely that goes on and on and on. And there are so many layers to it. And as human beings, part of the game that we play is to tap into those layers, ever higher, ever deeper, ever more expansive. And then to see how can we actually bring that into our material existence so that our material existence becomes this luscious, rich, transcendental experience as well, because who we are transcendental beings. That is a transcendental space that we talk about, consciousness. And some of it is very active. Some of it, people use the word awareness, but I think awareness is only one element of it, because there are other aspects of it which are beyond awareness. It's certainly our ability to engage with that awareness. So the more we equip ourselves, it becomes awareness when you can perceive it as awareness, when you can avail of it as intelligence, with which you can interact, with you can dance, so you understand, you discern, then it becomes awareness. But until that point, it's consciousness. It's something that is there for us, waiting. It's constantly interacting with us as well. So there are elements of it which we are never switched off from. And that consciousness is what we are talking about as Atman, as Brahman. That is so big, that is so far and so infinite and so eternal and so huge. It's almost, as a human being, impossible to tap into. But there are layers which are closer to us, which the rishis called Atman, and that is still consciousness. It's the same as what's beyond, except that it's more accessible. It's a bridge. The higher self, the higher that there is an element of our own self-awareness and consciousness, which is a bridge into that ocean. So consciousness is hard to define. I think scientists are having a difficult time defining it. But for me, it is an intelligence, aware. It is an intelligence that is sometimes already up and ready. Sometimes it's latent. Sometimes it's just slightly below the surface that's ready for us to tap into. And our job as a human being is to keep sharpening the tool of our physical senses and our mind, so that we, and detoxing ourselves of all the stuff that is not helpful in doing that, so we can actually tap into that awareness and that consciousness that's immediately accessible, and make it useful in making our lives incredible.
Beautiful. I've never heard the same answer, and it's just poetic. It's beautiful. It's just perfection. And
I would just say, ultimately, it's who we are. Ultimately, it's who we are. This being here is going to be gone in a few years from now at some point. But that consciousness, that intelligence, that presence is going to continue on. That's never going to go anywhere. Not going to die. That is consciousness to me.
Thank you so much, my friend. I'm really grateful for having you today on the podcast. I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.